Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta, and welcome back once again to an exciting evening for us because this is the beginning of our 17th year of For Art's Sake. And with me tonight is an old friend of mine, although he's very young. His name is Mark Nonestied. He's on the staff at Middlesex County Cultural Heritage Commission, where he's the outreach coordinator for the Middlesex County Museum. He's done a lot of volunteer work in East Brunswick. He's a resident of East Brunswick, but above all, he happens to be president of the East Brunswick Museum. Now, Mark is here tonight because he has authored a very special book. It's a pictorial history of East Brunswick. And you know, Mark, I have to tell you, first of all, that when I was asked to do this, and I'll be really honest, I said, oh, I've been in East Brunswick for years. I know where everything is. I really don't want to do a book. And Dave said to me, come on, you got to read this. It's really interesting. So he sent it over to the house. And I called him back about an hour and a half later, and I said, okay, let's set it up. Because I was taken back in time. And I have been here for 42 years in East Brunswick. And wow, it took me back in time. And it is an exciting book to read. So my question to you is, you're a real young guy. And I would have thought that someone who was much, much older than you and who had been in town much longer than you had been would have done a book like this. What made you decide that you were going to put all this time and effort into doing a history, really, of East Brunswick?
Wow. Well, it's a good question.
A long one, I know.
One that I don't think's easy for me to answer, because I don't always have an answer when people ask me that. I can tell you I have a passion for history. Driving force, that's history. And why it makes me do the things I do, I don't know. But I certainly enjoy understanding the township's history and just history in general. And you know, I'm young, but I guess it's something I really don't know.
Well, someone said to me that you used to run tours for the East Brunswick Museum when you were very, very young.
Yeah, well, I've been volunteering with the East Brunswick Museum, believe it or not, for about 12 years. Started when I was about 15, going on 28 now. I've been there for a while and have grown, have come to have had an appreciation for the history of this township. And I guess it's that appreciation that has kept me there as a volunteer for all these years. And also, I guess history is very fascinating, and the history of this township is very fascinating. So much has happened here, and there's been so much change here in this township over its existence. And it's interesting to have that understanding, what we were once and what we have become. I find that fascinating.
Well, why don't you start out with a little bit of the history of it. East Brunswick, let's see, the charter was 1860, if I'm not mistaken, right. But it really was settled in the late 1700s.
Yeah, actually, right, this township was chartered February 28th of 1860, and at that time we were carved out of North Brunswick and Monroe Township. People actually started settling in this township in the late 1600s. Names like Thomas Lawrence, who settled out in what's now the Lawrence Brook section of East Brunswick, came here in the 1680s. And there were some early roads that were in existence here in the 1680s also. And it's also appropriate to mention that there were native people that were living in what's now East Brunswick even thousands of years ago. There had been archaeology work that was done on what's now Edgeboro landfill, archaeology work done back in the 1930s. And
old tires and things?
And prior to it becoming a landfill, there was a campground there at one time that was part of native people. And they found, archaeologists had found a tremendous amount of artifacts there. So there's a long existence here in this township, whether it's from the native people or from the settlers that had been here, you know, well over 300 years now.
Were your mother and father into history, and did they, you know, pass on this love of history to you?
Well, I can remember being taken to places like Philadelphia when I was younger, and places that certainly had historical significance, and maybe that was the bug that bit me. So my parents, they have an appreciation for history, and I guess I'm thankful that they took me to these places, and it kind of gave me the opportunity to have a greater appreciation for history. They're not exactly as much as a fanatic as I am, but nonetheless, I mean, they certainly have an interest, and I think they're very proud of what I've become.
Well, when you started out on this book and you decided to collect pictures, actually make it a pictorial history, did you ever think you would have so many pictures, or did you wonder whether you would ever get enough?
Well, the requirements initially for the book were over 200 photographs, and being a volunteer at the East Brunswick Museum, I knew we had a substantial collection of old photographs, but certainly there was not enough to warrant the publication of a book. So I kind of sent some feelers out to old-time residents here in the township and got such an overwhelming response back from them. I ended up accumulating more photographs than what I needed. So I was very much, I was happy about that, that people were kind enough to open up their collection and let those photographs be used in the book.
Were there any stories that these people tell you that you were not able to put into the book? I know underneath each of the pictures are captions and things that have happened from what they have told you. Were there any things that they told you that you weren't able to use?
For the most part, I tried to put as much information as I could in there. Because of space in the book, I had to leave some things out. But for the most part, I tried to get the basic important information in there. Especially in some cases where we knew who the people were, it was important for me to identify those individuals in the pictures. So many times with these old photographs, there's no information about who they are. And many times when I went to go look at these photographs, the owners, or in many cases the descendants of the people in these photographs, would tell me who they are. And you know, I noticed that it was not written on these photographs, and only in the minds of these people who had them. So I felt that it was important, at least where we knew who these people were, to get that information down in there, because if anything ever happened to that person, at least it would, the names would be preserved in print.
Who were some of the big names? When I say big names, I mean people who really have the name and the families are still here.
Well, there are a number of old-time residents. The first person that comes to mind is probably East Brunswick's oldest-time resident, is Grace Hour.
I was just going to, yeah, I think I was reading your mind, but I was about to say Grace Hour.
Yeah, I mean, Grace has been in East Brunswick since day one. She was born back in 1910.
Oh, that's terrible. Mark, you don't say things like that. She is the first lady of East Brunswick.
Yes, she's a very lovely lady.
She certainly is.
And has a proud family history here in this township. She's, you know, I find her very fascinating because for the fact that she's been here so long, and I do say that with all respect. I mean, to actually talk with somebody that has seen so much change happen in this township, and to have been a part of so much of that change, and just an integral part in the community. I mean, she was much more, her family was much more than just a resident of East Brunswick Township. They were involved with so many civic endeavors in this township. And it's a pleasure to talk with her, and I was happy to get photographs from her and from her family, because the book just would not be complete without things from that family. They're just a phenomenal family that has been here, and they've contributed so much to this township. Some other families also of great importance to me was Alberta Uhas, who is a vice president of the museum, who I've known for a long time also. Another wonderful woman who opened up her collection of photographs. Many not just of her family, but of the area. She felt the need, I guess, years ago to collect photographs from the area to kind of make sure that they did not get discarded, and to kind of hold on to these treasures as a testimony to the history of part of East Brunswick Township. And she just had a phenomenal collection of photographs. And I was very lucky and for her to open up that collection for use in the book. And you'll notice there are a number of photographs in there that are credited to her. Other longtime families, farming families, that contributed to the book was the Jim Maurice family.
Jim Maurice.
Who
has notably been in the news in the last couple of weeks, and it's nice to know that that farm has been. I never realized it had been that old, that farm, and that land there, and it's wonderful to know that it will go on.
Yes,
it'll never change.
And there were the photographs that they show up in the primarily the agricultural section of the book, but there were just some very nice photographs from that family. Well,
the Smith family also, and from what if I can remember correctly, the Hours were also connected to the Smiths at one time.
Yeah, well, Grace Hours' maiden name was Smith.
Which is a good reason.
Right. But yeah, so that's all kind of connected. And it was interesting because you would see with a lot of the older time residents that there was a family connection with people from that section of the town. It seemed in those days they didn't tend to move very far. They all kind of kept close together. I mean, that's more apparent in the township's historic district. There are families that have been there for generations and generations, and still carrying that on. People who are still living in some of the houses that their great-grandfathers built, and it's nice to see that tradition is something that's continuing in that section of town. And and people have been very kind.
Well, the Herberts, wasn't there a division somewhere in that area that was called Herbertsville?
Yes, right. For some time, that section of town was called Herbertsville in honor of a man named Obadiah Herbert, who was an early 19th century resident.
I love that name, Obadiah.
Yes, he was a prominent individual. He owned a tremendous amount of property, had constructed several sailing vessels in that vicinity, which used to sail out along the South River. And they felt it a great honor to name that section of town Herbertsville in honor of him.
Something else which I think is so funny, that the reason, my voice is changing, I'm sorry, but the reason that, or not the reason, but when it was changed to Old Bridge, and you wondered where Old Bridge came from, it really came from, literally, the old bridge.
Right. Historically, in that section of town, the Old Bridge section of East Brunswick, which is in East Brunswick, has been in it since the town was formed in 1860. There was a bridge that was built, and it became old, and thus the name Old Bridge. Very early on.
They were very literal, the early people who lived here.
Yes.
No fancy names.
Yeah. In fact, early on, it was originally called South River Bridge, but I guess then it became old and was then known as the Old Bridge.
You know what? It is fascinating to think about when you look at this book, and I have earmarked some pictures in it and some things in it which I fell in love with. But if you stand down, or you go down into the Old Bridge section after you read this, and go down near the water there, and think that in 1860 or 17, in the late 1700s, there were people came in and they were relatives of people that live here today and settled this, and it was wilderness, and they had the courage and to start villages and to make friendships with the Native Americans that were here. It's kind of awesome to think about it.
Yeah, it is. It really is, especially because the fact there are lots of residents that are still here who have they're a tangible part of our past, and to know that their families have been here since this time and they're carrying on that tradition. It's something that is it's very moving.
Well, you know, I'm going to go to your book because all of a sudden I have a feeling that we're going to crazily run out of town. But there's a wonderful example here of a young girl, probably a so-called debutante at the time, And she's in the typical pose of her hand draped and holding on to a rose, and she's dressed in naturally the fashion of that time. But what got me about this picture when I looked at it very fast, I thought it was my mother taken years and years
Oh,
and years
really?
and years ago, because I have a picture of her, the same hairdo, and somewhat the same features, but the same, almost the same dress, the same thing. And wow, it was something to really, you know, to look at.
I think that's something that's fascinating about these old photographs. They are like time capsules, and when you look at them and the people, especially in a lot of these photographs, there's something almost mysterious about it, and very moving about it.
But it's timeless.
Yeah, yeah, very true.
There's another one here of a Joseph Crandall, and that's the Crandall family, and of course the Crandall School,
Right.
which was here for so many years. And it's interesting to note that you know, he was killed in World War I. But the family, I don't know, are there still Crandalls in East Brunswick?
Yes, there are.
There are?
Crandalls that are still around. Joseph's father was the local doctor there, Dr. Ira Crandall, back at the turn of the century. There are several Crandalls that still are in the historic district. A woman that lives on Cosman Street, her name's Emily, and her maiden name's Crandall, and she had some very interesting family history to tell.
There's another family here that is called the Rogers family, and they seem to be a huge family and a family of some note. And it's, again, I find people fascinating, especially their fashions. And if you just think about it and you can hold the stuff long enough in your closet, you can go right back to wearing it again. Let's see, what else? Oh, these and some of the wedding fashions, which of course the museum has. And this one I really got a kick out of. It's a three-person string band, and I wrote on the note to myself, culture in East Brunswick at an early time.
Right, yeah.
But it was the early music.
Yeah, yeah, there was that three-person string band, and there was a larger band that played in that section of town.
And it would have been wonderful to
Yeah.
have heard something like that.
Yeah.
It really would have. In fact, some of that, I think, now is coming back. There's another picture here of Henry Warnsdorfer. And my goodness, Warnsdorfer, the name, when I first came to town, the name Warnsdorfer was really a huge name. First of all, Warnsdorfer School had not been built. Mm-hmm. And that's where they had originally lived, was on that tract of land.
Yeah. They're certainly a prominent farming family from that section of town. And I was very conscious of trying to get all parts of the township in the book, and you know, pick out prominent individuals from certain sections of town and made sure that it got in there to get a nice complete story of the whole picture and the whole history of East Brunswick Township.
Well, Mildred Warnsdorfer was a principal of McGinnis School for I don't know how many years, and a wonderful, wonderful principal. So she has quite a legend, too, to follow. In this, there are just, you know, I could go on and on and on and on and on about this, but I certainly hope that people come out and not only take it out of the library, but to buy it, because it's a fascinating book to have. It's, you know what it is? It's a great book to keep on the coffee table. And people come in because, you know, me, you know, being slightly simple, it's so much easier to look at the pictures and just read a little stuff underneath it. Where do you want to go with all your work, though, Mark? You know, you're president of the museum, and I know you're interested in the museum. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the museum even in years from now? Because everything has to go through change. Mm-hmm. And I know the people down the Old Bridge section, I know most of them, and they're wonderful people, but they really hate change. I mean, they would love to sometimes to take that little village back to the 1700s.
Yeah, yeah.
And inevitably, you have to have change.
Yeah, I think it's a way of trying to introduce change in a way that it doesn't disrupt the character of that neighborhood and the people that live there. And you're right, it is a section of town that is, it's eerie in a sense because it somewhat has been untouched by change. It's nice that the museum is kind of in the heart of that district because we're so much a part of that section of town and the whole town in general. I hope in the future that, like any organization, we grow to include maybe other buildings. I mean, maybe that's a wild thought of mine, but certainly that's something that that's of interest. I mean, we have such a large collection of local, not just local photographs, but local memorabilia in general. And the thought of expanding, like any other organization would want to, is something I would hope to see happen.
Well, you know, we forgot about, when we were talking about people, Tom's.
Yeah, a famous landscape artist.
Landscape artist, and there's work in the museum of his.
Yeah, we have one of the largest collections of his artwork, and he's a late 19th century artist that for a time lived here in East Brunswick and did some wonderful local scenes, one of which has been reproduced in the book Winter in Old Bridge, which is one of the old schoolhouses in that section of town.
I liked a lot of his work, but I always found that it was somewhat somber and almost dark, as if he painted everything in the winter and the sun was not out. I don't know, there never seemed to be a lot of happiness in some of the work that he did.
Yeah.
Except for one or two pieces, and I think I have a small lithograph of one of his.
Yeah, there's a couple that are, I guess, a little bit more cheerful, but I think you're right. For the most part, they seem a little dark.
What other collections are you interested in that you'd like to see brought here?
Well, certainly, I mean, expanding on some of the wonderful things we already have. We have a large collection of textile and clothing, and some wonderful examples of clothing from the 1800s. We have a large collection of furniture from local individuals. So it would be nice to kind of expand on what we have to include various other examples in different styles.
Do you see a different look, perhaps, or maybe look is the wrong word, I don't want to scare anyone, but things changing within the village itself?
Well, I think some of the change that may be coming, hopefully, would be one that would better help preserve the community. Change has certainly done some negative things to the community, and there are a number of people who live in the community who've kind of, even though their houses have been changed, have been taking them back to a former state. So that's the kind of change that I would be interested in seeing happening there, kind of undoing some of the negative change that's happened in that community over the time, to bring it back to give it a little bit more of its charm that it once had.
But I thought any of the houses that were registered in the historically had to remain within.
There are...
when you were redoing or reworking the house.
Yeah, the district's on the State National Register of Historic Places, so there's some restrictions, but there has been some change that's taken place there. A lot of it had happened to before. People understood that those homes were historic. You know, many years ago they were just old houses and needed to be fixed up. And now I think people have gotten a better appreciation for the fact that you put the word historic instead of old, and it gives it kind of a better connotation.
Well, I know you were talking about Alberta Uhas's house before, and it's an unbelievable house to walk through. I mean, each room, you don't know where to start looking. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, she's done a one, and her husband too. You know,
she's so creative.
Yeah, the two of them.
Extremely creative.
The two of them have done some wonderful work. Yeah.
Well, I know at Christmas time too, and I know when, oh Lord, it's hard to think that far ahead, but unfortunately it does creep up on us. But I don't know. Are you doing the Christmas tours this year?
Yeah, they're planning to do a holiday house tour sometime in December. The dates are usually announced in the local papers and on Channel 8. But it's a nice opportunity for people to come down and get to go inside some of those homes that are there because certainly some of them are very spectacular on the outside and just as good also on the inside.
Well, it's a fun tour to take, and especially around the holidays. And coming back, there's always refreshments at the museum, and the museum is all decked out for the holidays. So it's really kind of a neat thing. Mark, just one last question, really, before you go. What do you see for yourself? I ask everyone this, regardless of their age. What do you see for yourself in the next 10 years?
I hope to, I guess, just better myself in understanding history and historic preservation. I mean, I enjoy historic preservation in general, and would hope to kind of progress within that field. So anything that would help me do that is something that I would certainly welcome. But there's so much understanding that still needs to be, so I feel that that's something that's important.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for coming tonight, but before we close out, we have a couple of seconds left. There's a sentence in the last part of this book which I absolutely love, and I'm going to read it if it's all right with you. It says, "The foundations of our current society were built by previous generations. Some reminders of these generations, like the Rogers House, have survived through the years. We must preserve these testaments to the glory of the good old days as a gift for future generations." And there's not too much I can add to that. I think there was a quote, and I don't know whether it was Mark Twain, but the best of tomorrow is made up of the best of yesterday and the best of today. I hope all of you will get a chance to look at this book, to get down to the Old Bridge section, to get a hold and go through one of the tours of the museum. I think old and new who live in East Brunswick will really love this. I'll see you all next month, and in the meantime, take care.